Welcome back to another episode of Awareness to Action Enneagram podcast. My name is Creek, and I'm with my unchanging co-hosts, María, Skora, and María José. Munita. Literally unchanged.
Your shirt, María José?
Does any of our audience know?
This is what I wear.
We did not change our clothes.
This is what I wear every week on a Friday. When I'm about
but it's
to.
Saturday.
No,
so.
well, but we're launching it on a Friday. When are we launching this?
Yeah.
Thursday. Well,
Thursday.
No, it comes out on
whatever.
Thursday.
Yeah.
Whenever we're recording this.
Yeah, we're breaking the fourth wall
whenever
here.
we're recording, I wear the same thing.
Back-to-back episodes here, folks. So those of you who are, have noticed that we're wearing
I was
the same
worried about
clothes
that.
from 2 weeks ago.
They just couldn't care less.
It's a thing. All right, so we are going to
our seven video watchers will not
Yes.
notice.
No. Anyway.
We're going to be jumping into a really unique part of the awareness to action model that is a very, very helpful tool for the coaches out there. The instinctual bias, specifically the pattern of expression of the instinctual biases. I never know which one to say.
I think they're both okay.
Yeah. Okay. Great. Why is this useful? How do you guys use this?
Are you going to bite your lips while I talk, or? Now, look, it's just.
We should give some context there.
Yeah, Mario was explaining or sharing how, in between recordings, how he just struggles to not say anything when we're talking.
Yeah. So and watching these videos, I literally see myself biting my lips.
Yeah.
So
whenever I start talking in the background, I can just hear Mario taking short, shallow breaths, like when it's like, oh boy, I better keep talking, or he's going to get in.
But we're here, Creek, and it is hard to do justice, I think, to how much we use the instinctual biases in our work, because it's a lot. It's such a good framework to explain so much of what happens with our clients, with the team dynamics, cultural implications in companies. So we use it a lot. So understanding not just the three instinctual biases, but how they kind of play out, this the pattern of expression just only enhances the power of this work. So it's very important, and we use it a lot.
Yeah. So I don't know, maybe we should kind of talk about how our approach to instinctual biases is unique and specific and different from some other approaches, and that sort of thing.
And of course, you can go back to previous episodes on the Awareness to Action podcast and talk and listen to more in-depth conversations about this.
Yeah. So for me, and I just have to say that, over the years, this is the part of my work that has gotten the most attention, I think.
Good and bad.
Good and bad. And honestly, it's a part of my work that I take the most pride in, quite frankly, to look back and say, hey, this was a pretty good insight, and to see how to apply it, right? Because when we're talking about the instinctual biases, we're talking about what other people might refer to as the three instincts or the subtypes, and those are different terms, right? So, even though sometimes people use them interchangeably, the subtype, or what Riso and Hudson would have called the instinctual variants, are the combination of the, two elements, right? The type and the so-called instinct. Big problems with the literature is that instinct isn't really a word that's used that much anymore. And if it were something that was real, there'd be more than three of them, right? So we're not talking about three instincts. And I also early on got frustrated with the limitations of the common terminology for these three things, whatever they are. because I just didn't think they captured everything that was happening in these domains. Okay, so the self-preservation, the things that get lumped into that have to do with more than just preservation of the self. So I changed it to preserving in general. Social, I just think, is just technically, one could argue it's the right term, but practically it's not, because it implies somebody being social. And quite frankly, people who know me well would be more likely to refer to me as antisocial than social, or, socially indifferent in the typical ways.
Socially inept, socially...
Look, this is your social interaction
awkward,
of the week, pretty much.
That's the only reason we do this podcast, is to keep...
That's right. I need friends, so now. Social implies extroversion, right? Social implies wanting to be involved in social movements. Okay. And this is one of the reasons that a lot of times people misunderstand this, because they think that people who are social are very concerned about, social issues. And that's not always the case. And certainly the sexual and or one-to-one terminology don't come anywhere close to capturing all the things that are, correlated in this domain. And so we just felt that navigating was a better term for social. But it's not just a different word for the same thing, right? It comprises a much broader scope of activities. And the same thing with transmitting, right? It's not just this one-to-one thing, but it is, I've got this stuff that's inside of me that needs to come out. And so I need to connect to somebody in order to transfer this thing. Okay. But it's about way more than just that one thing. So, we've expanded the scope of what these things mean. We talk about them in terms of verbs rather than adjectives, okay, which I think is important. And I don't know what else, Maria Jose, about the terminology itself is significant. Anything?
Besides the pattern of expression that we're going to expand on?
No, yeah. I just mean the terms themselves compared to other.
Yeah, I would only add that our experience with people, most times it's very positive in that they feel that it represents what their experience better than the other words. Now, you could say that self-preservation explains everything I feel, but people who are kind of uncomfortable with the other definitions find these are better suited for their experience.
Yeah. I'll just give an example on that one domain. Something I noticed years ago is that a high proportion of people who I would have thought of as self-preservation tended to have lots of pictures of their loved ones on their refrigerators, right? It would just be this thing where you'd go into a preserver's house and the refrigerator would be covered with pictures of their kids and places they've been and all this sort of stuff. Now, it's not universal, of course, and it's not only preservers, but there seemed to be a greater than chance correlation between those two things. And whenever I would ask them about it, it's just, yeah, I just like having those things there, right? And so it's all manner of preserving activities, scrapbooking, archaeology, or not archaeology, but genealogy, things like this. These habits, these attention to things that preserve something are much more common in what we call preservers than they are in navigators, transmitters. And it's not just preserving the self. Yeah. Okay. Although ultimately it does that, but...
Yeah, and I think that, as Craig said, if people want to know more about these things, we have several episodes about it. But in the coaching work, understanding the pattern of expression provides, I would say, a significant advantage or accelerator in the work that we do.
And there was an evolution in how I thought about this, right? And it's funny because I've been kind of pulling together all the things I've written over the years, and I can see this progression of my ideas, through those writings over time. And, because I used to think of it as 3 instincts. And then I started realizing, well, wait, that's not what it is. And I started, I did think of it as a stack in a way, right? And this is one of the things we want to talk about. It was like, well, I do this most, this second, this third. But over time, I started to realize that it wasn't so much that, but the relationship that people have to each of these domains that is what's important, right? So it's not how much I do something necessarily. It's certainly not how skillful am I at this thing, but it's what is my relationship to each of these domains. And that's what we focus on, and that's what we talk about when we talk about the pattern of expression. And the basic pattern of expression is we think of it as 3 zones, right? And one of these zones is a zone of enthusiasm. It's the things I care about. It's the things that are interesting to me. It's the things that get my attention. It's the things that I put effort into. And the second one is what we call a zone of inner conflict. That's something that I kind of love and I kind of hate. I kind of do well at times and I kind of do really poorly at other times. I have this, ambivalence often is interpreted as indifference. It's not indifference. It's two different ways of feeling about it. Okay? And the third one is where we get into indifference, right? The third domain is just something that, I just don't put much value on it. I don't pay much attention to it. I'm kind of indifferent to it. I might be good at it. I might be terrible at it, but generally I just don't care. So that's the pattern of expression, not what is my stack. Okay. Now the other thing is that we realize that there's a specific way.
Yeah, so let me expand on the previous thing before you move on.
Yeah.
It's not like, as you said, we do more of this and less of that. But I'm a navigator and I preserve and transmit as a navigator does. So I do not express it as a preserver or a transmitter would. And that's different too. So it's not like...
Example, please.
So because of how I feel about, or my relationship to these 2 domains, I could say that I transmit as a navigator. So I have this ambivalence, so I transmit, but it will never be as a pure transmitter because I'm conflicted about it. So I might seem as a transmitter for a second, but then you will notice that I'm just holding back. I don't want to go too far. I'm conflicted about how much I transmitted or if I transmitted enough. So it's like I can transmit, but I will always do it as a navigator, not as a pure transmitter. And of course, not as a preserver. And a preserver can transmit, but they will do it as a preserver would.
Yeah. And I think there are 2 pieces there that we want to tease apart a little bit, right? So one is kind of the qualitative part of it. Okay. So when I am transmitting, because I tend to, have a navigating bias, the way I transmit will look different from, say, the way that a transmitting 8 will transmit. So even though we're both transmitting, you can see, and I like to think of it as like an accent, right? So even though we're all speaking English here, I have a Philadelphia accent, Creek has a Midwestern accent, Maria Jose has a Chilean accent on English, right? And so it's the same language, but anybody listening can hear differences, right?
And yeah, just give me some, a specific example for people that maybe aren't familiar with these terms and what they kind of entail. So what does you transmitting look like in a practical example?
So it depends on what I'm transmitting about. Okay. So, for example, we started off joking about my inability to not talk during these things, or the struggle I have talking. We might even say that if I were a transmitter, I wouldn't notice my struggle with it, right? Because I wouldn't struggle with it. I would probably, a transmitter probably would not feel the inner conflict about this tendency to dominate the conversation that a navigator
would probably not be here.
Right? So that's, it would be a monologue, right?
Or we would not be here, actually. You would, we wouldn't.
Right. And again, this isn't to say that transmitters can't be, a co-host or something like that, but it is,
some of them are excellent
different
listeners.
Yes, I will say that. It's usually trained. And no, because I always want to be careful about that, because what I find is that transmitters often fall into the trap of giving themselves more credit as listeners than they deserve, right? And can overestimate their listening skills. And as a coach, that's something that I'm keenly aware of, right? But some of the best interviewers I've ever heard are transmitters. Howard Stern is a great example, right? I think Howard Stern is the best interviewer I've ever heard. And he's a transmitter, okay? And when you see the flaws in his interviewing style, they're transmitter related, okay? So now you take Terry Gross, for example, who is probably one of the other great interviewers in Navigating 5. And her flaws, for what they are generally related to the navigating. Okay. So this is where we start to see, okay, this looks different. Okay. Same activity, same high quality, but a different flavor to it. Does that make sense?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So there's qualitative difference in this way. But there's also a why we do it difference. Okay, so when a navigator is transmitting, they're often doing it for a navigating purpose rather than a transmitting purpose. Or when they're preserving, they're usually doing it for a reason that helps fill this need of navigating more than just for a purely preserving reason. Okay. So
I think that sometimes we just do it for the same reason. Like if I sleep, I don't sleep for navigating reasons. I sleep because I'm tired.
Yeah.
And but when it's kind of on the edge and I'm struggling to do something preserving, it's easier to do it for a navigating reason.
Yes. Yes, I didn't say all the time, right? I said, often, okay? So, and so cooking is a good example, right? The two of you like to cook, okay? Now, if we think about the pattern of expression, and again, we should probably describe what this is for each of the instinctual biases, but theoretically, if you're too literal about the pattern of expression, you would say, well, wait a minute, preserving is the zone of indifference for navigators. Creek and Maria Jose are navigators, but they really like this preserving activity. So doesn't that shoot a hole in your theory? Well, not necessarily, because for both of you, cooking has more than just a preserving motivation behind it. And I don't want to speak for you here, so am I accurately portraying that?
You are.
Yeah.
Okay, and how would you describe what you guys love about cooking? Or why you're drawn to it?
Yeah, to me it has several things, but I like to eat good food, and I think that I cook really good food. So that's one thing. The other thing, to me, it's like more community thing. Like to spend time with other people. I like to make them feel good. I like to have a good experience with other people and through food. So that's another thing. And as a one, to me, it's like a challenge as well. Like I want to make the perfect dish. It's like fun. It's like a game to me in a way.
There's similarities for me as well. I mean, probably shows my subtype as well, because the role I want for people to have, the type of person that I am, is someone who can whip up something tasty with minimal ingredients and that is uniquely good. and being exceptional in that area that is unexpected for someone like myself. And so it's creative as well, and it is about community, but it's more about the idea that I can do that and I am good at doing that I'm drawn to. It's part of my persona.
And this is why when it comes to the instinctual biases and when it comes to thinking about how they express in us, we kind of have to look under the hood of what's going on and not just look at the behavior itself, but the why of the behavior, the need that it satisfies. Like if I look at my own, relationship with providing food for others, okay,
just buy it.
No, so I'll give an example. So my wife and I will on occasionally entertain and have people over, and she's a preserving 7. Okay, so she likes to cook for people, and she wants to make sure everybody's happy and enjoys the meal. I will usually come along and double the recipe, right? And not literally by that, but I'll say, you know what, this isn't enough, okay? And we end up having twice as much food as we need to when I'm involved in the planning, because for me, I don't want anybody to leave thinking, geez, there wasn't enough food there. Okay. So it's a navigating sort of thing, right? I want to make sure that my reputation is not being stingy with feeding people. Okay. So again, somebody might think, well, why is he getting so much stuff? Is it, is he preserving? No, I don't care about that, right? I just care about what people are going to think.
Yeah.
So,
all right. So let's get into more. Let's talk about the pattern of expression for each of the instinctual biases.
Maria Jose. I've done enough talking for a while, Maria.
So you'll shut up for a minute. So the first time I heard about Mario was from a friend who said, I met this guy who has this weird theory about the instincts, and he thinks that all preservers, all self-pressed people are social second and sexual third. I really struggle with the old terminology. I just I need to think about it. And so that's the first thing I heard about Mario. And when I started learning about it from you, Mario, and then working with it, I realized that it does happen that way. So we all have a particular way in which the 3 instinctual domains express. And it's not kind of 2 profiles for each. So if I'm a navigator, according to our approach, transmitting is our zone of inner conflict, and preserving, it's our zone of indifference. When navigating, it's our zone of enthusiasm. So it's not like preserving could be the zone of inner conflict as well. And there are 2 versions of the navigator. We have just one pattern of expression. So we have 3 profiles. Preservers have that as their zone of enthusiasm. Then zone of inner conflict is navigating, and zone of indifference is transmitting. Navigators, zone of inner conflict is transmitting, as I said. Zone of indifference is preserving, and for transmitters, zone of inner conflict is preserving, and zone of indifference is navigating. So it's only those 3 options. It creates 3 profiles, and we just think it works. It represents how we see people, and it really helps to work, to know how to approach and to work with ourselves and with clients.
Now, other Enneagram teachers disagree with this. Other Enneagram teachers talk about there being 54 potential stacks, right? When we think about the 9 types, or we'll say 6 different stacks, within each type. Just not my experience, okay? And there's a couple of reasons why I think that I see it differently than other people do. And I want to start off by saying my original assumption was that there were these 6 possible variations and not just 3. But then, because I was going out and I was working with people and I was doing assessments of people, I started seeing the same patterns in the feedback over and over and over again. That people who were navigators tended to struggle in the preserving domain. People that were transmitters tended to struggle in what we call the navigating domain, things related to sort of political awareness and that sort of thing. And preservers struggled to promote themselves, to do the things that were related to transmitting. And that's just the reality of it. Now, that is looking at the data, that is observing people objectively, and not just thinking about whether they're good at something or bad at it, because again, this has nothing to do with good or bad necessarily. Okay? It has to do with, do we put attention there? Do we value it? Most of the people that I was working with were high performers. Okay? So they, were good at the things that were in their, dominant instinctual bias, but not everybody is. So that's important to understand.
You could say that if you look at this through the lens of how much we do each of them. And of course, the observation of that is limited, because we might see things and not interpret them as something related to the instinctual domains. But you could say that there might be 54 if you look at it from a quantitative perspective. So I see some people doing more of this and less of that, but assessing quantity is hard. And I would say that it's less useful. So, yeah.
The other thing is it's more prone to confirmation bias. Okay, you weren't quick enough there, Creek. There's a self-reinforcing tautology, which in itself is a redundancy, I guess, right? But if we go in assuming there are these 54 potential stacks or these 6 potential orderings, we can find data that supports it and then fall victim to it through confirmation
Same thing
bias.
Applies to our approach.
Except that we collect objective third-party feedback on our clients. Okay? And so we just get this data over and over again. And I've been doing this for almost 30 years, getting the same data over and over again.
And we don't necessarily need to get into, are these found or created, as far as are these
yes, one or the other.
Yeah. Is this model found or created? All of those sort of things. But I think there is, like with any model, you will find yourself in it somewhere. You will find a way to rationalize yourself into a model, whether it be yours or someone else's. However, I think the quantitative and qualitative distinction is really, really important. And then also, I think when my experience has been, it's the pattern of expression is easier to see more quickly, and it's more flexible to your unique experience. It fits more cleanly, and that's what a good model does. Is it doesn't necessarily limit the personal expression, but it flexes and kind of keeps its general shape dependent on what you are as a person and what you do. I think the other models can be, of course, useful, and you can find yourself in it.
Sure.
Great deep insights for wonderful growth, but I do find it a lot more complex and a lot more exceptions that need extra work in order to find my comfortable spot in this.
Yeah, and I would say that it's simpler and it's really actionable. To just know that if you have a preserving client, they might struggle with certain things, and how to work with a preserving client on the preserving domain, on the navigating domain, on the transmitting domain, it's easier. You get quicker to what works. I'm not saying that for every preserver, the solution will be the same or the issues will be the same, but they will be similar. And how you approach them, it's easier to get there. And to normalize the phenomena, to address it in a way that feels authentic to them, all of that becomes easier when you understand the patterns of expression.
Yeah, and I also don't want to just write this off as, well, there are different models and you can pick one that works for you and that's fine, sort of thing. Okay. The reason this is a valuable insight for us, because as coaches, our job is to help people see the problems and the solutions to those problems as quickly as possible and provide as robust and effective solution as possible. And again, we just know that if we are working with somebody who is a preserver, then their Achilles heel is going to be related to the transmitting domain. Now, this doesn't mean they won't have struggles in navigating, or they won't have some skills in transmitting. But the thing that will hold them back is their resistance to promoting themselves and their business and their accomplishments. Okay.
Also doesn't mean that they don't have skills in their zone of enthusiasm. There can be problems in any of the domains.
That's what I'm talking about. The Achilles heel is the weakness, right? I mean, Achilles was a pretty strong and powerful guy, in every other way. Okay. So yeah, I mean, often more than likely, their key strengths are going to be related to that dominant instinctual bias, that zone of enthusiasm. That's how they got to where they are. Okay. I know that my greatest strengths are related to the navigating domain. Okay. And my Achilles heel is related to the preserving domain. And for navigators, that's just going to be the way. I've seen it. We've seen it a billion times. Okay.
It's almost funny.
And it is. It's just like, it's almost like, it's almost like a game of bingo. It's like, how quickly is this going to come up?
Yeah.
Right. And it's not just
like with my client, the one who I said, well, you're going to struggle with this. And he said, how do you read me so well? And it was about not to not share the recipe. And I said, you're preserving. And he said, am I so simple? And I wanted to say, sorry, but you are,
Yeah. Because to an extent,
because it's like, right? It's not like they all do the same, but the mindset is the same.
Yeah.
The way in which they relate, we each relate to every domain is the same. And for a preserver, taking on, transmitting tasks or behaviors, it's the same. And they struggle, they see them in a particular way. And we just know. And we can anticipate the struggle.
And it's not just at the individual level. It's at the team level, right? If a team is very preserving oriented, you're going to see the same issues related to the pattern of expression. And it can be at an organizational level, right? This is why, I always kind of make the quip that this is why manufacturing companies, which are very, preserving, are always in a crappy building with no sign out by the airport, right? Because they just don't care about the transmitting stuff of, hey, look at me. It's how can we cut costs and, maximize, our margins on things, okay? If it's a transmitting business, okay, with a transmitting culture and a transmitting team, that the organizational dynamics are going to be chaotic. Okay, because nobody's reading the navigating stuff. It's just predictable. It's almost boring.
And we are going to talk about these things in more detail in the coming episodes when we talk about how to coach a preserver, how to coach a navigator, and how to coach a transmitter. So this is just to give you a flavor of it, to share the theory behind it. But we're going to provide a lot more examples on how to work with them in future episodes, right?
Yes, and Maria Jose has just landed the plane because she's up against the time limit here.
So is Creek.
That was masterful.
So
is Creek.
Absolutely right. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely right. So you guys have lives, as we have already talked about. This is my only opportunity to have friends here, and I never want it to end. Now, no, but to Maria Jose's point, if you don't understand this, you're not going to get the benefit out of understanding how to help people with their instinctual biases.
Yes.
Because you had to say the last word, right?
Yes. All right, folks. We'll see you next time.
See you. Bye.